I think whatever it is, you can certainly like what you do, but it is work. And you see that with people who are entrepreneurial. They're working all the time. They're working on the weekends. They find time to check out and do things. But you have to really, look in the mirror and say, hey, what steps do I need to do? You got to look into it. Sometimes we spend more time researching prices online or looking for the best travel deal than we do in deciding what we're going to personally do for ourselves, right? So, I mean, right? I mean, it's not an impulse buy. It's not, gum at the checkout. I mean, it's your life.
Relani Belous, welcome to Produce Your Passion.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No, this is this is a treat. You were actually recently at our first Produce Your Passion event, so thank you again for that.
Oh, it was great. I was happy to be there. I'm always I'm there with the virtual pom pom at least.
And this is a really interesting one. So I've had my graphic designer on this podcast who designed the logo. Okay. But this is particularly special because you are the help behind the TM.
Hopefully the R soon.
Hopefully the R, which I learned from you, of helping me with the trademark for Produce Your Passion. So I'm really excited for this episode, especially for a lot of brands and creators who have brands and sell themselves, but probably have a lot of questions about trademarks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Relani, for the audience, can you just start us off with a little bit who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Well, I have my own practice. Obviously, I'm an attorney. You can't see the back of me, my fin. But I'm an IP lawyer. I've worked for many years. I worked in-house for a lot of the entertainment companies. And that kind of thing. And then I decided to kind of forge out on my own after many years of doing that. And, I work in the IP and media tech space. So I don't do patents, but I do what they call soft IP, which is trademarks and copyrights. And I help people, with their brands and also just working with startups who are navigating, operating in the space of just not only IP, but, setting up their company. I do some corporate advisement and, work with, small to medium sized businesses that maybe they never had a lawyer before, or they don't want to have a zip code directory as a bill getting started. And so, just the basics. We happen to be in probably one of the most regulated states, so there's a lot to navigate. Just as a business owner, some small businesses are held to the same standard that some of the larger folks are, and once you start having a staff and employees or those kinds of things, then issues arise. But really, the mainstay of what I'm working on is branding and advising clients in that space about, I guess, making their mark in life, right? Yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you. And as far as your Produce Your Passion story, and I know it, you not only practice law, but you have your own brand with the Trademark Channel and everything you do with that, which I'm sure we'll get to. How did it all begin? Like, what was that moment where you're like, you know what, I'm gonna follow this path of law? What made you take action on that? What inspired it?
It's sort of a weird thing. I was, I started out as an accountant. So I started out as, 1 and 1 equals 2. And now I'm at 1 and 1 equals, well, let's see what it means, whatever a reasonable person would say. It's up for grabs. I think I worked in a space. I worked for the state, actually. I worked doing audits of banks, and there was a lot of regulatory overlay. We did joint audits with, other regulators. And in that capacity, I got to be exposed to, understanding what compliance was and certain things. And I saw that and I said, God, if these folks can do that, I can. And I'm pretty, analytical. And then then I said, all right, I'm going to go to law school and have a career number 2. And And, it's, you think you know what a lawyer does until you go to law school and you realize it's not like, someone bursting into a courtroom, like, here's that surprise witness or those kinds of things. And so I thought, that's kind of something. I wanted to work in entertainment. I didn't have a famous last name. And I thought, all right, maybe, that's kind of a foray into that field. And so that's sort of what I got into. And when I was in law school, I worked an intern for various guys in the entertainment space. And, that's what you do. You work for free and earn your keep. As they say, right? The only place you start at the top is when you're digging a hole. So I worked my way up and obviously that's sort of what entertainment is. It's brands. I mean, that's what a studio wants, a franchise that, is something that's marketable and, can make money over time. That's an evergreen property versus, a one-off kind of thing. And I really kind of took to that and, just began to manage a lot of that stuff. And so that's kind of how that kind of came to be. And I did that for many, many years, most of my career. And then I finally decided, I'm going to work for myself.
Awesome. Awesome. So I did not know that about the accountant part.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What a 1-2 punch, because I think they say three things. You need three really good things. You need an accountant, you need a lawyer, and you need a really good doctor. And you've got 2 out of 3.
Well, I was pre-med. So. To the disappointment of my mother, but yeah, I was pre-med, so I've kind of checked those boxes. I think this is it, unless there's something else in the horizon until I become a robot or something like that.
Right, until AI just takes over all of us, right? And then
yeah, that's kind of it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
So as you got into law, you're working for other people, you branch out in your own. Mm-hmm. What made you really focus on the trademark aspect of things and go in with your brand, the Trademark Channel, and really focus on that?
Well, one of the things is I obviously love brands. I have a very, not to coin your phrase, but a passion for brands. Obviously, my closet agrees with me, and really, it's one of those things that is not specific to any industry. I mean, every industry has a brand. I think we know to look for that. We know, look for the blue box for Tiffany, John Deere is the green tractor, Owens Corning, even just pink is part of, insulation that you don't even see, but, it's a brand identifier. And I really find it, fascinating about just how people do. They'll look for, the golden arches, or they'll look for the star, the Starbucks. And I really, think that that's a key thing that, makes who you are. I mean, sometimes the brand is your personal brand. Like we have Martha Stewart or, people who have their own name, or you have athletes who are their own brand and things like that. So I think it's very, interesting because it is all around us. When you drive down the street, when you walk down any aisle in any retail establishment, when you do your searches, even online, you're very brand centric. And so that's something that I felt, it really resonated with me. And also I think I hate to see people who, have a brand, work hard for it, and then they have a problem with it, and it's, especially as a smaller business, it's heartbreaking to see some of that thing go on. And also the Trademark Channel was sort of a side idea that really spoke to consumers, because there's plenty of content that speaks to lawyers, right? I mean, I get them every day, and they're, no one wants to spend time, the average person, reading, a 25-page or, 100-page, Supreme Court decision and not understanding what that means to them, right? And I think, the short form kind of analytic or what other brands are doing is more resonant with a consumer. And, so that is really the focus of the Trademark Channel, sort of how the Weather Channel brought weather, to everyone, and it's in the airport, and you think, oh, who would want to know about a landslide? But I mean, I think even in California, we've seen so many, tragic weather and natural disaster types of things that it definitely speaks to, it could happen to anyone. It's not, it's not specific. So I think, right, weather is also something that you're going to experience no matter where you live, or what you do, or that kind of understanding. So there you have it.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I would think, because one question that pops in my mind, I would think, and you let me know, with the evolution of social media, mm-hmm. and the amount of individual brands, like you said too, people themselves are their right. brand. I'm sure that has just multiplied beyond tenfold over the past decade or so, right? Just because people now have the ability to produce their passion and come up with something and a logo really quick and throw it up online.
Yeah, and I think especially, when you had, the COVID, whatever you want to call, situation, you had a lot of people, examining their life, or, thinking about, am I doing what I really want to do in life? Or maybe I should be an entrepreneur, or those kinds of things. And so it is something I think, it's one of those things that is very accessible in, okay, you know what, I can do this on my own, file a trademark and do those kinds of things. And I think a lot of people think they understand that, but I mean, I'm not sure, anyone would go on WebMD and go, oh, you know what, now I'm going to take out my own appendix, right? So I think, but it is out there, and you see, a lot of those things, with people being original, or they think they're going to palm off of something that is a famous mark. And, there are brands that are very aggressive, and that's why you see, like the big game, right? You won't see Super Bowl, right? And you'll see, people with, I'm having a contest, and you're not going to call it the Olympics because you're going to get a letter, and those kinds of things. There are brands that are they're very aggressive, because, that is the gist of that. And you see that with dupes too. Like, that's why prices of a lot of high-end goods have gone up, somewhere between 30 and 45%.
Wow, you are exactly right. All the Super Bowl ads would say, hey, come see the big game.
Come see the big game,
They
right?
do not say Super Bowl, and it's because of trademark infringement, right? They can't use that. They don't.
No, and there's even been, even with some of the daycare centers and things, they've had, stuff on the wall that are characters from certain studios, which I won't name, but, that's a problem. Like, you can't use that, or, because trademark protects a lot of things. You have not only your brand, trademark protects, trade dress. For example, like the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle is a trade dress. It also protects smells. The smell of Crayola crayons and Play-Doh is also trademarked as smells. So.
You can trademark smells?
Well, it's got to be a very unique smell. Yeah, but yeah.
So, if we could ask one side question here, because I think it fits the context for the conversation. So you just named some benefits of trademarking for the average creator or person that, like, they've really decided, okay, this is going to be my brand. Like, I know I want to move forward this in the long term. Why should they trademark? Like, what are the additional benefits of trademarking?
Sure. Well, and again, I will disclaim this by saying, you should talk to an attorney. These are opinions. This is not your personal legal advice. But I think, trademark gets, it's a right. It's not only a right to use, but it's a right to exclude. Because, it's one of the only IPs that you actually have to use to maintain. For example, like if you write a script, you own the copyright. You stick the script in the drawer. You never look at it again. You don't produce the movie. You own the copyright. And that kind of thing, right? Or you invent a process or a method and you have a patent. You apply for the patent. You don't have to use the patent. You own the patent, you know? And so, that is, that is that with those two. But when you have a trademark has to be used in commerce. If it's a federal trademark, it has to be used in interstate commerce. And so what that does is it puts everybody on notice that it's your brand, and that nobody else can use it. So, the registration gives you certain rights, and after a certain amount of time, you can file paperwork and your mark becomes incontestable, which means it's more difficult for someone to challenge your trademark. Unlike copyright, trademarks are also common law. So you can go to your Secretary of State, like here in California, you can go to the Secretary of State and register a local trademark, if you're only operating in California. So there have been cases where someone had a brand in a certain in a geographic area, and a famous brand could not be in that area because that person had prior, trademarks because they had what they call common law rights. So, that's something that it's important because one, I think if you're running a business, it shows that you're serious about, you're investing in your brand, but also it's something that, establishes rights for you, right? I mean, the same way you get a business license or you do other things. I mean, it is something that is, someone's going to identify you. And also, I think, if you're going to have a brand that's famous and you want to license it, someone's going to say, do you own I mean, a lot of the question is, do you own your intellectual property? And if you don't, it doesn't look, it looks more like a hobby than your work, right? And I mean, I've trademarked several things with relation to my business. It's an important thing to have. I think sometimes people are like, oh, we'll wait. And, they don't think about, whether or not what that's going to mean if you wait. Right. So I think it's an element that obviously is key, and you can just look around and see all the famous marks. I mean, they've I mean, if you want to be in a certain place, sometimes you have to emulate and mirror that behavior, right? And you're like, okay, well, I'm not saying do everything that everybody else does, but I think it shows you're serious about your brand. Not only that, but you've also established a right to exclude others. And someone will see that you own it, and maybe they'll think twice before they do something and try to get around you or do something like that, right? So that's a key thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And on your journey of becoming a lawyer and doing everything you do, I'm sure it wasn't an easy road. That's a lot. Especially because you went through accounting, pre-med, accounting.
That's a lot. That's
a lot of stuff. But
a lot of learning.
What are some of the biggest obstacles that you have encountered on your journey of law? Whether it's been financial, mental, emotional, whatever it was, and then how did you overcome those?
I think it's one of those things, and I think it's ever changing. But I think you begin to realize the law is, there's the law, and then I think you have to, it was good that it was more of a second career because I had worked, and experienced that. But I think there are challenges because, you have to think not only linear, but non-linear. And I think dealing with, levels of people who are running companies, especially when you work in-house and you're advising executives, they're not going to read past the first sentence. Okay. And you just have to, one, understand what the issue is, because somebody just wants to know, can I do it or not? And I've gotten those emails from outside law firms where, it's like 3 pages and I still don't know the answer. And it's being directed towards me, but I think it's like anything else in life, you have to know your audience. And I think the challenge for me was not taking things personal, and getting past that, and being able to know also that, I wasn't really brought up to be entrepreneurial. I worked for, like I said, the majority of my career in house, and it's a very different journey for a lawyer working in house than it is at a law firm, right? Because it's just, you've got many customers, and when you work in house, you got one client, and the focus is on the bottom line. It's not necessarily, if you're constantly, aiming for perfection, you're never going to have any progress. And you see this with very successful people. They're constantly being, sued or challenged, but they're there, right? So it means that they're doing something. I say, God, if you're not being sued, you're not, so it is. And you've got to manage expectations, because people are looking to you for advisement. I mean, especially if you work as a criminal lawyer, that's the difference between your client going to jail or not. So I think it's challenging in the sense of, it is a very mentally challenging job. You do see a lot of, and lawyers may not show it as much, but you do see a lot of, you see it, like substance abuse and mental challenges, because, some people are working, 80 hours a week, or doing these things, and you're constantly dealing, no one's calling you up going, what, I had a great day today and everybody's complying with my contract. You don't get calls like that, and I think, I think it's not taking it personally is hard, because, there's always two sides, obviously, in every case. And I think it's a challenge to just not say, okay, like, this is just work, right? It's different if you work in marketing and you're like, oh, what a pretty balloon, or, an event. But, some of these things, you're just, you're biting your nails in like, oh, what decision are we going to get? You write you write things to your client, what's going to happen. I think it is. So I think it's a daily, you've got to just daily find a way to decompress on that, and have a boundary line with folks.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and you're right, because you're dealing with this stuff that a lot of people don't want to touch or even look at, but it has to be done.
Sure. And
Like you have to do
people,
it.
like, you're talked to in one word sentences. Okay, read this, like, or three, hey, take a look at this, and you've got 10 minutes to tell me what I need to do. Or, the word priority is overused, and things like that. But you have to like what you do. I think I like it. I mean, I like what I do. I think some people may have become a lawyer. People become things for different, for maybe the reasons, that they thought it would be something different. I really like what I do. I like helping clients. I am honored that they choose me to help them on their business journey, because I see, and that's kind of why I'm in this niche too, is we're similar, right? We're scrappy, we're smaller, and you have to be very Rocky-esque to stay in the game, right? So I think that's part of it.
Awesome. And uh, I know we were talking about how things are rapidly changing. Is that currently today, like with AI and things
Mhm.
like that? I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax right there. But just now with AI taking people like, oh, I created this work of art from AI, and it's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Is this,
look, I think, and again, like, the Copyright Office has before they removed the head of the office. I mean, they have a three-part work on on what AI is, and again, there's been a lot of cases we're seeing now where the fair use issue is there. And I think a lot of people throw around the word fair use, but fair use is not a right. It is an affirmative defense position that, you've done something and you have the, you have the right under the fair use, thing to do that. And I won't get into the whole legal thing there, but AI is here. I think, it's still in its infancy. I mean, it's certainly not something that I would say, hey, you should rely on this for legal advice. But I have heard a lot of stories with lawyers that, you have clients now who, may take a document or something that the lawyer did, put it in AI, which I don't recommend, because now if it's a confidential thing, there's issues there. And they'll come back to the lawyer and they're like, okay, well, we have an 80% chance of winning this according to, whatever the platform they're using. Or they'll question, it's sort of like phone a friend now, right? That AI is sort of like, okay, I don't know the answer, but I'm sure Perplexity or ChatGPT or one of these platforms can answer it. And so you have where you had the lawyer going, okay, here's what we do and this. Now you kind of have not only the challenge of dealing with what your client is questioning, but now your client is like, oh, okay, well, it's not even my friend said this. It's like, well, I put this into the platform and this is what it said. And so again, right, it's only reliable based on the information that's out there. I think in certain industries like, digital copy or things that you can alter, it's definitely, an asset, and it will save time. There's a lot of things that, if you do litigation, you can summarize, you can have something summarize a deposition that's 500 pages maybe and take a look at it. And obviously that's going to be a question for a lawyer. How do you bill for that? Where you used to bill 20 hours and now it took 3 seconds, right? But I mean, someone still has to review it. And we've seen, and it's happened time and time again, where lawyers have used some of the cases that ChatGPT has, said or whatever, and they're wrong. They're wrong. And that's happened several times. So I think from that standpoint, it's not reliable. I think, from an art standpoint and whether that will be copyrightable, that's still a fluid thing. I mean, I think, obviously there's a line where it's not or where it is, but a lot of that is, is going to matter. I think the concern would be more is what are you, an individual, putting in there, because you don't know where that stuff's going. I mean, would you, take your confidential documents and leave them on a park bench somewhere and go, okay, well, maybe somebody won't pick it up, or maybe somebody will learn from it. I don't know. I mean, right? So.
It reminds me, I'm really glad you broke that down, because I've been in a couple of doctors' offices before where there was a sign that said, don't confuse my doctorate degree with your Google search. Because, people go online, they go, well, Google told me this, this, and this. It reminds me of that. So and that's actually reassuring, you saying that, because it does validate the need for humans to be there and to be monitoring all this and double checking things. And, maybe AI will be a great tool.
Well, it is, but I think you still need, human intervention. I mean, you see it at the grocery store, like something rings up wrong or whatever, you still, like, there's nothing you can do. There's a person standing there who's got to go over to the self-checkout and fix it and do that. So, again, that's sort of where we're headed, I think, on AI and the interface. And that's been going on, as far as, hey, let's let this make your playlist, or AI is, doing that. I mean, the AI that's been more talked about now is the generative AI, not the AI that was like, oh, if you like pizza, then you probably like this sub, right? Or whatever, right? Or you like this movie, you'll like this. So it's, and there's a lot of concerns on, just voice, name and likeness things and those kinds of things. That's really, what are you going to own, or do you, how that's going to vet out? That's all got to be, it's a interesting time, but it's, I think, everything has a dark side. I mean, I'm sure we all see that with, even the phishing scams have gotten better. on the logos or your delivery. I mean, so I think there's always another side to these things that, could record your voice and use it somewhere else to pretend it's you or fool somebody, or, it's definitely got, the darker side. So
Okay, thank you. And so for people that may be thinking of going into law and becoming a lawyer, or maybe they just don't do, or if they feel that entrepreneurial spark in them to go do something else, but they're not taking action on it. What advice can you give to those people out there that have this vision to do something but aren't taking the action?
well, I think not taking the action is still an action, right?
Hmm.
And doing nothing is still doing something. And I think, everyone's got their own process, but what's holding, I think you've got to think what's holding you back, or is it what you really want? And I always say, write it down. I'm sure, we all should do that. Be understand what we're grateful for, but also, what are you, like what this show's about? What are you passionate about, and what are you doing? Are you doing what you really want to? Or is this your second or fifth or 10th choice, or those kinds of things? And I think whether it's law, maybe, find yourself somebody who does what you do and see if they'll take the time to speak to you about what they do. I think that's very important because sometimes we, like a lot of things in life, we romanticize it, or we think, oh, lawyers are just riding around in, these cars and they're doing this, and it's work. I think whatever it is, you can certainly, like what you do, but it is work. And you see that with people who are entrepreneurial. They're working all the time. They're working on the weekends. They find time to check out and do things. But I think you have to really, look in the mirror and say, hey, what steps do I need to do? I think it's not like, oh, I'll just do this. I think you got to look into it, right? I mean, I think sometimes we spend more time researching prices on online, or, looking for the best travel deal than we do in deciding what we're going to personally do for ourselves, right? So, I mean, right. I mean, it's not an impulse buy. It's not, gum at the checkout. I mean, it's your life. So I think, law is not for everyone. I mean, I see that a lot of times, just friends who you get burnt out, and everybody I think has ups and downs with what they do, but you've got to really, it's like people who go visit the school they're going to go to, right? You're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't for me, or you don't want to virtually tour the house because you're like, oh, now I see my neighbor has got, 18 cars out front that they're working on, and I don't want to live there, right? So I think you've got to do your diligence like anything else. I mean, you may decide that, you created something in your mind that doesn't exist in reality either.
Wow, that's a good one right there. You're right. Doing your diligence, doing your research, and I've now correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I have heard people that are going into law. They say that know a specialty, like go into a niche of law. Is that true
Yeah,
instead of
well,
just trying to become a general lawyer
I
these
mean,
days?
law school does not, you don't have necessarily a specialty in law school. Like, you are learning, the basic, laws like torts and constitutional law. And you can certainly, do an internship or take an elective, but really, go into something that you want to do. If you're passionate about a certain type of law or whatever, I think sometimes people, again, because of the job situation, they may, you take a job and you're like, oh, I'll just do this for a few years. I'm not really interested in personal injury, but I'll work there. And then, you turn around and, I think we look at things in life and you're like, 10 years has gone by and I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I mean, people have a choice in life. You find a way or you find an excuse, right? I think so. I can't really speak to that. I mean, I think you really have to go, not, you got to go for what you really want. And again, sometimes it's writing that down, sometimes it's researching it, looking at what people do. I mean, we have so much information at our fingertips now to even watch what people do or read about it, that I think there's plenty for you to be able to do diligence on what you do and see what people are. And you'd be surprised. I mean, you cold call people and they'll take your, I mean, I've done it. They'll take your call. I mean, sometimes they don't, but if you don't try, you don't get anything.
We had somebody on this podcast that coined the term moonshots, meaning shoot your shot. The worst someone can tell you is no, or they don't respond.
Well, and I say that to people, right? You're either going to be in the same position or better.
That adding that right on. That's really good. Really good. And if we could, this has been awesome, Relani. And if we could talk a little bit more about the Trademark Channel that you have going on, because I like the comparison to the Weather Channel, and it's fun following you on social media because you are always doing something somewhere. Talking
I'm like
about
hummingbird. I'm the hummingbird of IP. Yes.
So could you take us a little into that journey with the Trademark Channel and what all you've done with that?
Like I said, years ago, I think when I first started my practice, I thought, there's nothing like this that really sort of sums up these cases in a quick way. And also just, we were going to kind of go out on the street and look for, there's so many counterfeits at flea markets and, in the streets of New York, and because of the lockdown, that kind of went away. That wasn't something we could actually do. But the passion for brands, I thought, there's got to be something that I wouldn't say, low, like a Sesame Street-ish kind of, like a cartoon-ish feel to trademarks that made it, friendly and yet understandable, and you would kind of learn something, sort of, Pee Wee Herman did that. It was like a kid show, but for adults more, because the jokes were, a little bit, lowbrow, or you had to understand, all the innuendos and things like that. So, I think that's really something that would be, educational and fun, and it's relevant to, especially now, just you have so many content creators, so many people creating their own brands. You have a lot of niche brands that, have these capsule drops, or influencers that, relate to that. And that helps sell that. And just being able to speak to them, in a way that was not, every $8 word and things, and made it relatable with images and just made it fun. It wasn't, hey, okay, I need to get into some, dissertative, repartee on this, and just do that. And I now am working with two other people who are on the team, and one of them is a PR guy who works with me, but also I have another colleague who manages high-end brands, and she's come aboard to sort of join the team, and we're going to build that out and figure out what that looks like. I think it's ever changing, but the fundamental is it's really brand centric. It's what it's talking about what brand owners do. It's talking about trademarks and how that relates to people's businesses. It's talking about mistakes that other folks have made, and just sort of examples of what's going on in the general marketplace and in trademarks, but in people speak, right? And I think there's plenty of those resources for lawyers, and so I don't need to be another law journal that talks about that. That's there, I think, but I couldn't find anything like that. So I think that goes back to your other question, what's not there that should be there, and that's really what makes what's not there, that isn't. And I think you see that with a lot of inventors, or people who create things and who go on a Shark Tank and think, okay, well, I never knew I needed this to hold this, or this chair does this, or whatever. People are finding a need, and hopefully, filling that need with something that's positive, and it has a value.
Awesome. Awesome. And was there anything else that you wanted to share, or any future plans of any projects going on?
Just, I guess, stay tuned, watch the Trademark Channel, where we're always gonna come up with something fun, and we're pounding out a few ideas, so it's got to be a surprise, or then you.
Yeah. Well, and as when you really start to think of all the trademarks out there, when you like show the big McDonald's, or these familiar logos that Coca-Cola, whatever it is, like that you've grown up with. You said something earlier about trademarking. It reminded me, if you want to be like the big boys, you got to do what the big boys do. And there's a reason why they have all trademarked. And
Sure.
someone had told me once, the farther you go in business, it's not if you're going to get sued, it's when you're going to get
Well,
sued.
right. I mean, look,
Even if you're the best person in the world, you never do anyone any harm, you get big enough, you're getting sued.
you know what? Even the biggest quarterback gets tackled, right? So,
your analogies are great. I love it.
I mean, look, you don't have to be, you can look at what their traits are. I'm not saying that you have to be like them, but you've got to forge, your own path. But yeah, I mean, don't look in the rear view mirror. That's not where you're going, right? You got to stay focused on what's ahead and what you can do.
Awesome. Well, Relani, this has been a fantastic conversation. Before we get out of here into the last word, where can people find you, your law firm, the Trademark Channel, anywhere you want to guide people to look up your stuff or work with you?
The Trademark Channel is very easy. It's just a website, the Trademark Channel. You can find me on LinkedIn. My law firm is my name, Belous Law. You can just look for me online. I'm there. There's not that many Relanis in the world, so you should be able to find me. But yeah, if you want to check out the Trademark Channel or my anything, just love your brand, and keep building that goodwill.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Relani, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. Any last words you want to leave us with before we get out of here?
Well, I would say, you're making your mark, so stay passionate, and that is your mark. So that's great.
Sounds great. And thank you for all your help. I've already learned so much from you just in this world, because like I've told you before, like the whole trademark, it's a whole other exploration.
Yeah,
stuff.
It's always interesting. It's always interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Relani, hang around for just a second, but thank you so much.
All right. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in. To learn more, go to produceyourpassion.com.